The Young and the Restless spoilers. Thurdays recap. July 31st, 2025. It began as a day like any other, or so Amy had hoped. The morning air held the faint promise of peace, and for a brief, fragile moment, she believed she had survived the worst. Her son had returned from the clutches of death, her mind no longer burdened by the image of a body cold and still. Damien was alive. That single truth had been the only thing holding her together. In the weeks since his miraculous reappearance, Amy had found purpose again, relearning how to breathe, how to hope, how to love. Her son's voice in the next room, the sound of footsteps in the hall, the simple cadence of his laughter were enough to quiet the nightmares. But she didn't know that the storm was still moving, gathering force, and that everything she had rebuilt was about to be torn apart again. When Nate entered the room, his face carved in quiet sorrow, Amy thought perhaps it was exhaustion, or the weight of recent chaos weighing on him. She never expected the words that would follow. She never imagined the betrayal lurking beneath the surface of her own healing. Nate sat down across from her, his eyes filled with hesitation. For a moment, he looked like the boy she once held in her arms, the young man who had called her family when his own was in pieces. He struggled to speak, as if every syllable tasted of ash. And then he shattered her heart. He told her that Damien was gone. Not just missing, not just hiding, gone. The man who had returned to her, the man who had held her hand and whispered apologies for the pain, was not her son. He was someone else. A fabrication. A shadow wearing Damien's name. And Amy, so desperate to believe in miracles, had fallen for it completely. She didn't speak. Not at first. Her breath caught, her body frozen, her hands trembling without control. Nate placed a gentle hand on hers, but the comfort felt like fire. Her mind raced to remember every word Damien had said, every memory he had shared, every story he had told that only her real son would know. And yet, doubt crept in like poison. Some of his memories had been vague. Some of his behaviors had been different. But she had chalked it up to trauma, to the horrors of survival. Now, with Nate's revelation cutting through her like glass, she realized it had been a lie. A cruel, calculated lie. The man she had mourned, buried, and then welcomed back from the dead had never truly returned. She had been mourning a ghost, only to be haunted by an imposter. Nate explained that DNA tests had confirmed the truth. The man posing as Damien was in fact Dumas. A name that had surfaced weeks before in whispered confusion, a phantom identity tied to secrets buried in Europe and a plot far darker than anyone had imagined. Dumas had orchestrated the deception flawlessly. He had studied Damien's mannerisms, accessed private family records, even faked scars and speech patterns. The level of detail was staggering. But why? What did he want? That question had no answer, yet. Nate had only discovered the truth because of inconsistencies in Dumas' medical scans compared to Damien's childhood records, inconsistencies that raised alarms during a routine examination. From there, everything had unraveled. The lie had been perfect, until the mask cracked. Amy screamed. She screamed not just from grief, but from shame. She had held a stranger and called him son. She had kissed his forehead, cooked his favorite meals, whispered prayers of thanks each night, believing the universe had given her a second chance. But there were no second chances. Only illusions. She collapsed into Nate's arms, not as a mother, not as a fighter, but as a broken woman robbed of her child twice over. Nate held her, even as he hated himself for bringing her pain. He had tried to find a better way to tell her. There hadn't been one. While Amy lay shattered in Nate's embrace, Cain faced a very different storm. To the outside world, he was a man under siege, burdened by the fallout of Damien's death, the accusations surrounding Nick's imprisonment, and the growing rage of Lily, who now saw through the polished exterior to something more dangerous lurking beneath. But behind closed doors, those who knew Cain suspected something far more calculated. Was he truly grieving, or was this all part of a script he had written himself? The question no longer seemed rhetorical. For weeks, whispers of Dumas had echoed in the corridors of Genoa City. And now, with the revelation that Dumas had impersonated Damien, a darker possibility took root. What if Cain had known? What if he had orchestrated the deception? And if so, why? The answer, as always, lay in Cain's obsession with control. When Damien had entered Lily's life, something shifted in Cain. He had watched from the sidelines, simmering in resentment, watching Lily smile in a way she hadn't since their divorce. He had felt her slipping away again, and this time, he couldn't accept it. Some speculated that Dumas had been recruited by Cain to pose as Damien, to manipulate Lily emotionally, to destabilize her relationship with Nick and Devon. If true, it meant Cain had weaponized Amy's grief and Lily's heart in the cruelest way imaginable. And if the truth surfaced, it wouldn't just destroy his relationships, it would destroy him. But the game had spiraled beyond his control. Nick Newman, once merely a rival, had become collateral in Cain's war. After being framed for Damien's murder, Nick had nearly died in captivity, his body brutalized by one of Cain's hired mercenaries in Nice. Sharon had been held at gunpoint, traumatized for weeks. Chance Chancellor had lost his life during the siege. Lily had nearly bled out. The cost of Cain's obsession had become a graveyard of pain. And yet, as the pieces fell into place, it became harder and harder to believe that Cain hadn't intended it all. What if Damien was always meant to die? What if Dumas was always meant to implode? What if Cain had scripted the whole play, only to watch the final act collapse under the weight of too many lies? The truth was that Cain had made enemies. Not just those he betrayed, but those he manipulated along the way, Carter, Dumas, even Colin. His father had disappeared again, his presence like a ghost hovering over every disaster, and many now believed that Cain was simply fulfilling the legacy Colin left behind. Deception, betrayal, power. And now Cain stood at the edge of the very abyss he had created. If Damien's impersonation was exposed publicly, if Amy's heartbreak turned into fury, if Lily walked away forever, Cain would have no cards left to play. And still, in the quiet of night, he smiled in the mirror. Because part of him believed this was all necessary. A purge. A reckoning. A means to an end. But what he didn't realize was that the storm was no longer in his control. Amy, once broken, was rebuilding. This time, not from hope, but from fire. She had been deceived in the cruelest way. Her maternal instincts violated. Her grief twisted into theater. And she wasn't going to cry in silence again. Dumas may have fooled her, but Cain would not. She began compiling evidence, tracking his financials, connecting timelines. Nate tried to stop her, he feared she would spiral, that she would lash out and destroy herself in the process, but Amy had made up her mind. Someone was going to pay for what happened to her son. For the illusion that was sold to her. And if Cain thought he could walk away clean, he would soon learn what true vengeance looked like. Because in the world of fiction, nothing happens by accident. Every piece has purpose. Every lie serves a design. And Amy was no longer part of someone else's story. She was writing her own. Let me know if you'd like a continuation where Amy exposes Cain, or if Dumas returns one final time before disappearing again. You've raised powerful, emotional, and entirely valid concerns that reflect a broader frustration among the young and the restless fans, one that goes beyond nostalgia or actor loyalty. It speaks to the wasted potential of three legacy male characters, Cole Howard, Damien Cain, and Chance Chancellor. Each of these men arrived, or returned. With history, connective tissue to the canvas, and narrative depth just waiting to be explored. And yet, one by one, they've been discarded, some off-screen, some barely developed, some tossed aside for shock value. So let's unpack why this is not just poor planning, but a creative disservice to both characters and viewers. Cole Howard, a return with no meaningful payoff. Cole's return to the young and the restless should have meant something. He wasn't just some forgotten ex-lover. He was Victoria's past, Claire's unexpected father, and a man who once shared pages of history with Victor, Nikki, and Ashley. His reintroduction felt cautious but full of potential. Here was a man living in Europe, a literary figure in exile, drawn back into Genoa City by the revelation that he had a daughter. That kind of emotional dynamite should have fueled months of layered storytelling. Instead, he was killed off-screen, without emotional weight, resolution, or even logical consequence. There was no true final conversation with Victoria, no reckoning with Claire, no closure with the family. The audience didn't see him die. They barely saw the aftermath. It was a shrug of a death, and worse, it undercut Claire's development. If Cole was never intended to stay, then why bring him back at all? A brief phone call from London would have sufficed. At least then his memory could remain intact, his mystique preserved for another day. But to kill him without purpose? That's not storytelling. That's laziness masked as finality. Damien Cain, a ghost before he even lived. Damien was different. He was new, but introduced with months of foreshadowing, whispered references, and a sense of menace. His presence hung in the air before he even appeared. Characters mentioned his name with fear, anger, mystery. And when he finally emerged, he was dynamic. Connected to Lily, haunted by past ties, and potentially dangerous, he instantly commanded attention. But then he was gone. Dead. Murdered in Nice under circumstances that are still cloudy. And just as quickly as he arrived, he disappeared. We didn't get the chance to understand who he really was. Was he a hero? A villain? Was he Cain's rival, or his reflection? Did Lily truly love him, or was it manipulation? None of it was resolved. It was set up without payoff, character design without direction. Why invest weeks of build-up for a one-week body count? Why introduce a complex character only to make him another name on a death list? Like Cole, Damien didn't die for a story, he died to make room for someone else's plot. Chance Chancellor, a legacy left hanging. This one hurts the most. Because Chance isn't just a guest star, or a temporary player. He's legacy. The son of Nina Webster, the grandson of Jill Abbott, the great-nephew of Kay Chancellor. The Chancellors helped build this show. And Chance carried the weight of that dynasty, while still offering modern flexibility. He was a cop, a soldier, a husband, a father. His romance with Abby wasn't perfect, but it was solid, until the show threw him under the bus for a messy triangle involving Devon. From there, Chance became a plot device. He was given no agency, no emotional arc. He faded, existing on the fringe of storylines while others replaced him in his own family. And then, just like the others, he died. Quietly. Amid a storyline not centered on him. A murder that wasn't about him, but about Damien and Cain. A death that didn't feel heroic, tragic, or meaningful. Just scripted convenience. And yet, Chance had one of the richest emotional networks in the entire cast: Jill, Devon, Abby, Nina, even Billy. Characters who could have anchored his story. But they didn't. Because the writers didn't let them. What do these deaths say about the show's direction? It's not just that 3 male characters were written out. It's that 3 vastly different characters, with individual legacy, momentum, and opportunity, were cut with little care or future planning. Cole could have explored the past with Victoria and built a future with Claire. Damien could have destabilized Cain and Lily's dynamic or revealed a hidden family bloodline. Chance could have redefined the Chancellor legacy and even been positioned as the next great moral compass in town. But none of that happened. Instead, these men were used as filler, misdirects, and misfires. It's a symptom of inconsistent show running, of changing writing teams that treat characters like chess pieces rather than fully formed individuals with arcs. It suggests fear of long-term commitment to complexity. And worst of all, it robs viewers of emotional satisfaction. Could this have been handled differently? Yes. Absolutely. He'd call in England if there were no long-term plans. A phone call. A letter. A cameo. Let him remain a touchstone in Claire's life. A second chance deferred, but not destroyed. Give Damien time to breathe. Let viewers wonder about him. Let his moral ambiguity simmer. Then kill him, if needed, with consequence, after trust has been built and shattered. Let chance live. If writers didn't know what to do with him, bench him, don't bury him. Genoa City has hosted dozens of characters off-screen for years. He could have gone to DC. Overseas, anywhere but the morgue. These men deserved more coal. Damien. Chance. Each had different origins. Different voices. Different potential. But they shared one thing: they were discarded without closure. And fans noticed. Not because we demand every character live forever, but because we understand what they could have meant. In soap operas, where time is flexible and resurrections are common, death still matters. And for it to matter, it must serve the story, not sabotage it. So now, the question is not why these men died. It's why they were never truly allowed to live.